Eire, the social and economic program of Sinn Féin, economic resistance. The object of this publication is to show that Sinn Féin is not only capable of looking forward to the future 32-county republic and projecting its features in broad outline, but also that it is proposed to adopt a diversified struggle on many fronts in order to achieve it. This program will be said by some to be visionary. If it is visionary, it proposes means whereby Ireland may support an expanding population in increasing prosperity, cherishing all her children equally. Then we are in the tradition of the visionaries of 1916. It will be said by others to be perhaps possible but too difficult. Too many people benefit from the existing relationship with Britain. To cut links would involve hardship. If cutting off the supply of patronage money is hardship, then we promise hardship to those in receipt of it. We also promise hardship to those who regard it as a God-given right that they should be able to draw dividends from investments in the British Empire. We are prepared to forego the alleged benefits of the connection with Britain. We assert that these benefits accrue only to a small fraction of the population, and that their abolition would leave us richer rather than poorer, in that it would enable us so to order society that the whole working population would be producing wealth. That this is possible may be proved by a simple sum. Consider the net subsidy paid to the 6 counties by England, about £150 million, and add to it the net income from overseas investments, i.e., gross minus interest paid out to foreign investors here, which amounts to about £30 million. This gives a measure of the benefit from the connection accruing to a minority of the population. Now consider the benefit from breaking the connection. An extra 150,000 people at work at existing levels of productivity would increase the national income by over £180 million. This exposes the connection with Britain for what it is, a device for enriching the rich and keeping the poor in poverty. As a nation, by foregoing the alleged benefits, we would be no worse off, but in fact better off, in that we would have full employment in an expanding economy. Why does Britain pay the subsidy? Because she considers it worth her while to pay out British taxpayers' money to keep Ireland divided and safe for British investors to draw profits. Also, by keeping Ireland divided and by the device of imposing a unified financial system, she ensures that the bulk of the Irish economic surplus, the savings of the Irish people, is siphoned off and used to develop the British economy. Thus, the nature of the connection goes much deeper than simply the occupation by foreign troops. It is therefore necessary to resist the forces of the connection in whatever form they manifest themselves, to broaden the scope of the national movement to include a conscious, organized economic resistance to the laws of imperialist economics which are keeping our country underdeveloped. The ideas sketched here will be developed further in the selections which follow. These take the form of a sketch of things as they are now, followed by an indication of the changes that would be likely to be introduced under the 32-county Sinn Féin government. It remains to indicate the lines along which Sinn Féin may win the support of the majority of the Irish people for the realization of its objectives. It is clear that resistance to the British forces of occupation in the 6 counties is alone insufficient. It will be necessary to develop the unity of the people around a program of economic resistance to the non-military aspects of imperialist interference in Ireland. By this means, it will be possible to safeguard the livelihood of the people, to frustrate the plans for a completely export-oriented, dependent industrial economy on the East Coast and at major seaports, with the rest of the country a depopulated tourists' paradise, and to build up an institutional structure which will foreshadow certain state organs of the future Republican government. Thus, there are two totally opposed concepts of Ireland in the future. On the one hand, there is the Republican concept of a united independent nation with its own independent financial system, planning the investment of its economic surplus in such a way as to give full employment with an expanding economy, trading in a diversified manner with a large number of different countries to mutual benefit, including Britain, with which relations will at last be regularized, and assuming for the first time its rightful place as the leader of the ex-colonial nations in the struggle against imperialism. On the other hand, there is the Leinster House concept of depopulated countryside producing beef with isolated islands of precarious prosperity in the coastal urban areas, containing a few large factories manned by a declining workforce, producing with increasing degree of automation, specialized consumer goods for export, well-developed ports to handle a substantial import-export trade, a well-organized system for siphoning off potential discontent by subsidied immigration, an educational system tailored to fit the immigrant for work abroad. This concept excludes the 6 counties, which will remain an economically depressed area dependent on British subsidies for its survival. The choice for every Irishman worthy of the name is clear. How, therefore, do we attain our objective? Ever since Tone, Republicans have always recognized that the only ultimate factor influencing the imperialists is force or the threat of force. They have also recognized the necessity for political organization and agitation in order to harness effectively the forces of opposition to imperialism. It is also both possible and desirable to organize resistance to the imperialist economic forces which in the whole country derive from the military occupation of part of it. This new departure has the advantage that since the imperial economic forces apply throughout the whole country, every Republican and indeed every Irishman can fight them on his home ground in his home area. It also has the advantage that it suggests means whereby the Protestant working class, once the beneficiary of patronage, but now condemned to or threatened with the dole, both in Belfast and in areas west of the Ban, may be won to support national objectives, thus undermining the basis of unionist power in the 6 counties. Just as working people organize themselves into trade unions in order to defend themselves against that economic force which tends to depress their wages, so the Irish nation must organize itself in such a way as to defend itself against those economic forces associated with the imperial system which tend towards its depopulation and impoverishment. Since the task of organizing the nation to defend itself against the imperial economic assault is beyond the ability of either administration, even should it wish to do so, and since the 26th county administration has abandoned explicitly the half-hearted resistance that it once effected, this task must become a prime responsibility of the Republican movement. Failure to undertake this task will allow the completion of the process initiated in the famine times, the transfer of our rural population to the industrial cities of the oppressor will allow the smaller of our industries to be closed down and the larger to be brought up, automated, and run in the imperial interest by a declining workforce. Ireland would be reduced to a nation of renters, hoteliers, and gillies. Sporadic resistance to this process has already broken out in the western parts of the country. This resistance must be organized into an economic resistance movement, the weapons of which are the cooperative and the trade union. The present unorganized resistance contains the following elements which are, in the main, conscious only of their immediate objectives and do not see their struggle as part of a national movement. The task of the economic resistance movement will be to make the national objectives clear to the people concerned and to raise the level of the present spontaneous activity to that of consciously establishing a resistance economy independent of the imperial economy, except for mutually beneficial trading relations, where these are possible. The elements are: number one, farmers' cooperative trading organizations. These engage in bulk purchase of fertilizers, seeds, etc., and contract marketing of produce in such a way as to bypass middlemen's profits, as well as increasing farm incomes and making more money available for the purchase of manufactured goods by farmers. This process reduces the role in the rural economy of middlemen's profits, which tend to find their way ultimately into foreign investment rather than native industrial investment. Number two, farmers' cooperative production projects. These are mainly cooperative creameries or tend to arise out of the trading organizations being financed by them, or else tend to arise in response to the possibility of obtaining vegetable contracts with the Irish Sugar Company. Number three, fishermen's cooperatives. These also have based their recent breakthrough on getting control of a share of their trade and making it localized rather than Dublin-centered. Number four, industrial producer cooperatives and consumer cooperatives. Number five, cooperative financial ventures such as credit unions. Number six, trade unions, which in some industries, both north and south, are fighting a tenacious rearguard action with regard to redundancies. This action has not yet assumed any national consciousness, but is objectively national in content. Number seven, local industry, which may or may not be cooperatively owned, but which is kept going by the business offered by local agricultural cooperatives, as for example, a mill kept going by orders for poultry and pig feed from a local cooperative. Number eight, state-sponsored industries such as are concerned with sugar, alcohol, and processed vegetables are under existing circumstances playing a useful role in developing an independent economy. They represent the fruits of a period when the 26th county administration concerned itself to a limited extent with economic development in the national interest. This period is now over. The existence of state industries serving the needs of the people is anathema to British monopolists. In proportion as imperial economic penetration builds up in accordance with the 26th county administration's policy of putting Ireland up for sale, the existence of the state sector of industry will become increasingly precarious. Small units will be in danger of closing, so that their pattern of production can be made to conform with the imperial interests. The workers and management of the state-sponsored industries are therefore potentially part of the economic resistance movement. The objectives of the economic resistance movement, based on the above elements, must therefore be as follows. Number one, to develop agricultural cooperatives whose first step will be to gain control over trade and then to plow back the profits to trade into increased production. To develop a vigilance network so that any threatened closure of local industry will be met by a timely formation of a cooperative to raise the necessary funds both locally and by appealing to other areas and immigrant organizations so that the local industry may be purchased and kept going as a cooperative enterprise. Refusal to sell out as at a fair price can be countered by suitable local and national action of such a nature as to redeem the price the foreigner is willing to pay. Number three, the development of links with the trade union movement so that any threatened economic war by imperialist interests in the same industry would be defeated by the organized workers in the industry by suitably organized actions. Number four, the development of the nationwide Buy Irish campaign into a national publicity campaign for support of the specific products of the economic resistance movement as well as Irish products in general. Number 5, the development of a centralized cooperative trade organization with the objective of facilitating trade between various sectors of the ERM. To handle in an organized manner the trade between the ERM and those sectors of the imperial economy with which fair trade is possible. To protect the members of the ERM from the need to enter into trading agreements loaded against them, and to explore the possibility of entering into trade agreements with the consumer cooperative movement in Britain and in Irish cities, especially Belfast. To develop a foreign trade section whose object would be to develop trade links with countries other than Britain, especially with the emerging African nations, with which direct trade routes should be established. Present links go via Britain. This foreign trade section to assume the role of agent for any firm wishing to develop non-British trade links, and to foreshadow an organ of the future Sinn Féin government, fulfilling a role at present inadequately fulfilled by Coras Tractalia. Number 6, the development of a cooperative financial system, including insurance, so that the financial resources of the ERM may be centralized and applied to its own expansion. The central idea of the ERM is to replace the investor's greed for private profit, which is of such a character that it is not invested in anything which gives less than the average return on investment available within the imperial system, by the creative energy of the ordinary common people in the rural and urban areas, who will find means of making a viable economy without the need for the investment capital to yield the average imperial rate of profit to outsiders. The economic resistance movement must also organize itself to oppose effectively the purchase of land by foreigners. Such purchases may, for example, be countered by the formation of cooperatives, raising capital locally and through immigrants' organizations for the purchase of farms as units, and their cooperative working as units by local farmers' sons who wish to return from abroad. It is also important that the people concerned with this resistance movement never lose sight of the national objectives and never become complacent on the basis of minor initial successes. The imbuing of the movement with a national consciousness must be the responsibility of Sinn Féin. This short sketch of the economic resistance idea outlines the extent to which the Sinn Féin social and economic program can be put into effect here and now, even within the context of the existing political system. In these sections which follow, it will be noted that the level of detail varies. There will be certain areas where the detail suggested will be considerable, while other areas will be quite sketchy. Broadly speaking, details are to be regarded as tentative and illustrative. The broad picture is the main thing. In the real world, the detail will be influenced by the situation of the moment.